This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Sara Blackmer. She is a decorated U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel turned award-winning tech executive. She brings battlefield precision and boardroom credibility to every venture she touches. Her mission? To lead with purpose, influence for good, and scale innovations that make the world better. As a senior partner at Solyco, did I say that right, Capital?
You did. Solyco Capital. That was really good.
Solyco Capital, thank you. Sara doesn't just deploy capital, she dives in. She works alongside teams to build cultures of excellence, guiding operations from the inside out to unlock growth and impact. She also serves as the CEO of FluidLogic, a hydration technology company, transforming how athletes, tactical professionals, and everyday humans perform at their best. Rooted in 15 generations of military service, Sara is passionate about service, discipline, and multiplying positive influence across her sphere and empowering others to do the same. Her story from fighter jets to frontier tech is one of thriving in male-dominated industries, building teams that win and delivering results that matter. Sara is a sought-after speaker for her insights on leadership, culture, and scaling ventures, and for the compelling way she connects her military and business journeys to the real world impact. So, Sara, thanks for being on the show today. It's great to have you on.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm really pleased to be here today.
So we heard a little bit about you in the bio, but of course we want to get deeper into that. So why don't you just give us a little context, kind of where you grew up, and you have this military background, and kind of where you got to today.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an Army brat. So Daddy was career Army, and I grew up all over everywhere. So I was born in California and moved about every 3 years my whole life. Was in Berlin when the wall was still up. So, did the Checkpoint Charlie thing.
Wow.
Was in high school in Heidelberg, Germany. So I got to go to prom and castle, a really amazing sort of global exposure experience for a American youth. I think that most Americans don't get. So I feel very, very fortunate to have had that experience. I'm a Michigan Wolverine, go blue. I went to school for my engineering degree in naval architecture and marine engineering. My family are all Hoosiers, and so for me to have gone someplace else was, especially to a rival like Michigan, was a little bit of an odd thing for them. But they were very supportive, and my mind is wired for math and physics. Most of the rest of my family's mind is wired for things that are not that life sciences, history, theater, English. That mine is completely different. So I was a little bit of an odd duck always from the beginning. But in the ROTC program at Michigan is where I think I found what would be my future calling for leadership and for technology integration that leads to making the world a better place. I'm really very thankful for the time that I had there. That led me, when I got my commission, to being an aircraft maintenance officer with fighter jets, F-16s at Shaw Air Force Base. I got to tool around with some very awesome people doing a really incredible mission, touching some pretty high-end, technology. So it was kind of like this little perfect trifecta of awesomeness from my
Ah,
perspective. And I've been trying to find that everywhere that I can go. Where do I have really awesome people with a really awesome mission, with a really awesome technology? And that's kind of been, I think, the story of my career from there.
yeah, that's great. So now you are a senior partner at Solyco Capital. But you're also the CEO of another company. So how do you be a senior partner and a CEO of another company at the same time?
You don't sleep. No, I'm just kidding. So one of the beautiful things I love about Solyco, so Solyco Capital is a private investment firm, but we really take the best of what exists for private equity and marry it to the best of what exists for venture capital. So we invest in disruptor type companies, technologies or processes or people that are going to fundamentally change the face of whatever business they're in. And we're market agnostic, but asset specific. And so are they a disruptor? Do they have this exponential growth path? And is there then this special thing that I think some way for us to dive in and work shoulder to shoulder with that company to help them be better than what they could have been on their own? So monetize faster or achieve growth objectives greater than what they could do. FluidLogic is one of those portfolio companies that we invested in. And my role was to really be sort of the strategy advisor at the beginning for that founding team, and then also to be a board director. And following that, we had a transition of leadership where the board asked and the founder if I would come and lead as CEO. And so I've been doing that for a couple of years. That's not usually the way that we work and dive in shoulder to shoulder. This is a little bit more involved than the kind of approach we're normally taking with our portfolio companies. But with FluidLogic, it just made a lot of sense. I could bring a lot of organizational discipline, processes for foundation, for scale, and for growth. In addition to this military understanding of how to do business with the government, we had a military business in FluidLogic, and so being able to kind of help grow and drive that really were some of the things that I brought to the table.
So hearing about those two positions and also, your military career, the very male-dominated industries. So how do you maneuver that, and how does that feel? I mean, does it feel like you're really a pioneer from your perspective, or do you look at it that way?
Um, well, so interesting, and there's a couple of things to kind of pick apart there, I think, Steve. So the first I'll say is that yes, I have always been in what feels like, not what feels like, what is a more men than not rooms. In some rooms, I'm the only woman, and it's noticeable for both me, I think, and for the men in the room. And that's been really my whole entire life. Being in math and physics, STEM-based programs, those are generally more men than women. Being in the engineering school at Michigan, that was definitely more men than women. Being in naval architecture, marine engineering, I mean, if you want to think of like an old school, male dominated kind of a field, shipbuilding is it.
Yeah.
Then I go into the military. There are high teens. I want to say, I don't know what today's statistic is, but somewhere between 16 and 20% of the US military is women. So clearly, dominated by men. Aircraft maintenance was a technical field where you have a lot of people working for you at any given time. I mean, the teams are very large. So those are typically have been traditionally male dominated. Fighter jets, fighter pilots have traditionally been male dominated. And then going into business, that has also been, and business and tech, fairly male dominated. I have had, I don't think about the fact that I'm a woman in a man's room. I think about that I am me in the right room.
Yeah.
And my mind is just wired in such a way that I have aptitude for business and technology, and I'm inspired and excited by using that to serve. How do I use this to make the world a better place? And so that just happens to put me in these rooms and in these spaces. I don't think about the fact that I'm a first, although I'm a first in a lot of ways. I'm the first woman to wear a uniform in my family, although I'm 15th generation military. I had some Rosie the Riveters. My grandma was a Rosie the Riveter. So I was not the first woman in the military, but certainly the first woman to wear a uniform in the military, supporting the military. I was the only woman in my graduating class at Michigan for naval architecture, marine engineering. I am the only woman in my partnership of 10. There's 10 of us, there's 9 men, and there's me. In startup community, there are very few female entrepreneurs, and the percentage goes much, much lower when you think about a CEO who's hired following a founder in a startup environment, and I'm one of those. So I do understand that there's a lot of onlys in my career, but I don't think about it as I have a position that I need to take now, or that there's something there that I have to, really call out. I just think about me and who I am, and I know that those are the right places for me. That said, I do feel a responsibility for women who come behind me to not feel like they're alone. That's the way I've handled it, and I don't seem to have challenges with that, but I know that that is unusual, and I only want to do what I think can help any person who's junior, whether they're male or female, really understand how to progress in their career and how to, be a better leader and develop in whatever their subject matter expertise is. And I want to help nurture that. But I especially want to do that for women so that they can see a coach, a mentor, a role model that looks a little bit more like they do, maybe that has some of the same shared experiences that they have had, just to help them feel like, oh, I can see myself there. Now I can see where I can get there. I did not have any of those when I was growing up. So I certainly have a desire to give back.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now, with this vast experience that you've had, what do you think Solyco Capital, why is it different than other venture capital or private equity firms? What makes it different, and why are you still there?
Yeah, so I think we're really unique, actually, now that I know some things. So I am I'm a tech executive, and I'm an operator. I build and lead and drive high performing teams that have something to do with advanced technology. So when I was first invited to join Solyco by our managing director, John Garcia, it took them a while to convince me that this was a good thing. It's like,
Mm,
I don't know anything about capital markets or about, capital stacks or about financial strategy in this really, huge M&A kind of global level. Like I know P&Ls, I can run, I know what a good balance sheet looks like. I know what I need that to look like. But when you start thinking about really creative financial strategies, um, was super immature. And what I realized though is that what makes all of that possible are really good foundational businesses, run with pretty critical operational best practices. And I'm really good at that. So I thought that that was kind of a nice balance to this team. But what I think is special about Solyco is that one, we don't run from exceptional. We know that that's what we want, that that's what we want to invest in, and we hold to that level. And I don't think that that's always true. So instead of choosing, some kind of a mandate or some market segment, and instead of accepting that, some companies are going to fail and that things are going to go wrong, like we are very hardcore over on, we are only going to be participating in the best opportunities that have, crazy awesome returns, and that we are going to bet on ourselves to drive them to success as much as we're betting on the companies to be successful. And I think that's unusual. We take a private equity kind of mindset about wanting to be involved. We don't throw money over the fence and just hope for a quarterly report. That feels very private equity. But we don't usually take majority control positions. And we're very friendly investors where we want to nurture and support the founding team as much as possible. That feels very venture capital. We expect that all of our companies are going to be successful. That feels very private equity, even though we're investing in companies that look like the profile that you would find in venture capital, late stage startup to early stage growth, pre-profitability. But there are some things that we do to de-risk that before we participate. One, are they in revenue or burgeoning on in revenue with a long, pipeline of either of commitments from customers and clients, so LOIs or POs or longer term contractual relationships. Are there really strong indicators that there's good product market fit and that there's a demand signal that de-risks the investment to have those things? but because they're pre-profitable and because they're still in this early stage, us being involved allows us to help them through that growth trajectory and really take advantage of that exponential growth. And so we're always seeking 10x, 50x, 100x kind of returns on our invested capital, which is an unusual thing too. So I think that this a willingness to not constrain ourselves by a traditional PE model or a traditional venture capital model and choose what we think, cherry pick what are the best of all of those and smush it together and create our own thing, I think is pretty unique and exciting. And I'm very proud to be a part of it.
You came at this from a very non-traditional way, as you described. So what did he see in you? What did the senior partner said, I want you to join this firm. What was it about Sara that he said, we got to have you?
Well, you would have to ask John Garcia to get his opinion. I would hate to speak for him. But what I will say is when we first met, we sat on a board together. We sat on a board together for one of the local universities, so Oakland University, there in Southeast Michigan, just outside of Detroit. And we were both on this board of advisors. I was on the executive committee helping to really run it. And in one of our meetings, I was talking with the academic staff about who were looking for research grants, and they were putting together, proposals for federal dollars and, things that academia does. And I talked to them for a long time about business development and I had done quite a bit of business development, high-end deal making for the government, mostly in defense, but across the board. And I was counseling them on how important it was to, really understand what a business development cycle looks like and who you need to know and who you need to be engaging with and how long that cycle would take and, just a whole lot of best practices there. And there was another woman on the board who volunteered to do quite a bit of this business development for them. And then I almost like, do you guys understand what a gift you've just been given and why this takes so much? And really just supporting the idea of the investment that these board of advisors were making in the university to help them in their research efforts be as successful as possible. And I think John was a little surprised, taken aback, and kind of impressed with that. I don't remember this engagement that he and I had, but we spoke apparently after this session. And, he said, I really appreciated what you had to say in there. And it wasn't until later when I was advised to seek his counsel about a current business that I was operating, that I said, "Oh, John Garcia, that name is familiar." And he's like, "Well, you sit on a board together." And I said, "Oh, I didn't know that." And then when we met again, and he said, "Hey, we sit on this board," and I said, "I'm so sorry, I do not remember you, but please help me."
Uh,
And so I think it was during that time that when he got to know just a little bit better about my style and approach, that really he thought, gosh, I know a lot of people who are in finance. I know a lot of people who are lawyers, who are accountants, who can help on, the more traditional M&A space or venture capital, private equity space. But, here's somebody who really knows operations, operational excellence. And I think that this exposure and experience on the DoD side was particularly interesting for him too. So, again, you'd really have to ask John if you wanted to know, his perspective about why me, but he did spend a lot of time courting me about, these are the things I want from you. I want this operational excellence, I want the engagement, I want the way that you can message between different stakeholders, the technical impact to a business perspective and the business perspective to an engineering team and those kinds of things. I think were skill sets that he was looking forward to bringing to the team.
when listening to your story, what do you think working on fighter jets and being in the military, what lessons did you learn from that that brings you success in the business world?
Well, there are so many. I think it would be impossible to say these are the, two lessons, period.
Hmm.
Um, just every day I go back to how fortuitous I was to have this experience of officership in the United States military. Because the United States military is an incredible force. And I, of course, am biased, but the Air Force is the best service.
Yeah.
And I think that the way we invest in training at all levels in the military, both from an subject matter expertise, a technical perspective, and from a leadership perspective. Again, at all levels, what should the leadership look like at whatever level it is that you're at, and what should it look like at the level right above you, so that we can prepare you for that level, that next level, as you promote into that. Like that's exceptional, and business does not do that very well at all. In terms of really doing a disciplined and comprehensive leadership and personnel development program over the course of someone's career. The military is exceptional at that. And so I'm very thankful, that I had that opportunity. And I think if I had to really just give you a couple of top of mind, takeaways, the first is that the military taught me the proper way to deploy servant leadership. And in my mind, it is the best leadership method, the most effective, the most useful, and certainly, for me anyway, the most genuine. And I try to bring a service mindset into everything that I do, and I try to train it into my teams. It's one of our core values at FluidLogic. It's our number one core value, service. How do we serve our community? How do we serve each other, as teammates? And, how do we provide superior, exceptional customer experience for all of our users? And I think that service mindset is important. And I talk all the time when I bring, one of the things is that I want to talk to every single person who's going to be on my team before they join my team. It's kind of like a culture interview with the CEO. I think it's really important to both have that FaceTime, and have everyone feel like they're important enough to get that FaceTime. But then also, for me to know that those who are joining my team really fit into this culture, that we've developed based on these core values. And I ask all the time, I said, hey, I changed the toilet paper roll. So if you think there's a job that's beneath you, you're not one for my team. And just this mindset of serving, like how can I jump in and help? What is that piece? And so servant leadership, I for sure would be a key takeaway from my time in the military. The second thing is, I have developed this, I think, both while I was in the military, but way more after I've left active duty. And I was active duty for about 6 years, and then the rest of my time I was in the reserves, until I retired, which is so funny to say you're 42 years old and you're a retiree,
Yeah.
but I retired. And the second thing, though, is this idea of relentless positivity. And Colonel Powell called it, or excuse me, General Powell called it, uh, positivity is a force multiplier. It's his 13th line in his 13 leadership lessons from his time in the military. Positivity is a force multiplier, or perpetual optimism, I think it was the word that he used, is a force multiplier. And I use the word relentless positivity instead. But this idea that you are relentless about finding the way to yes. It doesn't mean that you're fake cheery, and it doesn't mean that you're recklessly enthusiastic, that it's all going to work out, but you don't have a plan. But you're relentless about finding the way to yes. And that positive mindset about there is a way to yes, and I can get us to yes, and my team together, we can get to yes, I think adds this whole nother dimension to excellence execution that you give up if you're saddled with negativity, or a cannot do attitude versus a can do attitude. And Henry Ford, whether you love him or don't, whether you think he was a good dude or a terrible dude, said an awesome thing, while he was building Ford. And he said, if you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And I truly subscribe to that. This idea of relentless positivity is really important to me. And I think that I started that mindset from my time in the military. And then the last thing, it actually gets me into trouble sometimes. But I am a General Patton-esque kind of a leader. And I am really good at making decisions based on 80% information, not waiting and stagnating until you get, that next piece of information or that next piece of information. And why I say that sometimes gets me into trouble is because when you are in high intense mission operation execution, that is a huge strength because you just need to make a decision and move on. And then you can adjust the decision later if you need to, but you got to make a decision and go. And you need to do it confidently enough that everybody's going to come with you. And it needs to make sense. Everybody's going to come with you. And I'm really fast at decision making. Why that gets me into trouble is because in business, everything does not need to be a fast decision. It doesn't need to be a slow, lengthy, terrible, awful decision process either, but it does not need to be a split second in the moment decision. And I am so fast at making those decisions and connecting those dots in my head that I will have, in some cases, I'm really much better about this now, but in some cases, we'll leave members behind because they won't make that leap as fast as I do, or they don't understand all the context. And so in corporate, in military land, you issue an order and you go, and everybody knows that they're going to go and follow. In corporate land, there is no such thing as orders. And so, you have to bring everyone with you in a different way, where it's much more an art of influence in leadership than it is anything else. And so, that Patton-esque style, will sometimes get me into trouble when I just go too fast, and I really need to be able to bring the team along with me. But those would be three things that I would say are good takeaways.
Well,
Uh,
those are
you know,
great.
servant
And
leadership, relentless positivity, and making fast decisions.
well, and two, that perfection or the goal of trying to make it perfect before you move or getting it just right, kills creativity and gets people frozen. Things don't get done. So you do need to kind of step forward and move forward, even if you're not 100% there yet. As you said, 80% rule. That sounds good.
Yeah, and I
So
don't know who said it, but somebody said, perfect is the enemy of progress.
yeah.
And I, am a complete believer in that too. So you got to move, but you got to move forward and kind of in a direction that's aligned together. And that's the job of a good leader, is to help make sure that happens.
Now you said it earlier, and it sounds to me like you go in not just as an investor, as you said, but you also go in as a coach. So you go in and you help these companies get to be efficient and I think we can agree that culture is everything. Having that good culture, breeds success. So, how do you build that world-class culture, especially when you're coming in when the company is somewhat already there? How do you go in there and say, okay, I can see we need a culture shift here. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think culture is the most important thing and the hardest thing. And I think it's a hard thing to build, and I think it's a hard thing to change, and I think it's a hard thing to protect. And I think you got to do all those things. And I kind of there's kind of like there's a two-parter here to this. The first is, Solyco's mindset is, how do we provide C-suite talent to teams that normally couldn't get that themselves? And we coach on a lot of things. We coach on operational execution, we coach on business development plans, we coach on strategy development, we coach on pivots, to business models and to go to market plans and all kinds of things. We coach on financials, we coach on financial strategy. Um, we spend a lot of time with our teams trying to provide them with as many resources as they can have from us to be as successful as possible. That said, I think that one of the things that we try to discern before we invest with a company is, what is their willingness to accept feedback and to actually do something about that feedback. So it's no use at all for us to dive in and work shoulder to shoulder with a team if they're not going to be receptive to that activity. It's no use to say, here are all these tools and resources that you have access to, if they're like, you know what, thanks, but I just want your cash. And if you're a company and you're just looking for cash, I will tell you that you're not doing it right. I would highly encourage you to rethink your method, because you're getting the short end of the stick if you're just getting cash. Um,
And
so
would
then,
you say that most companies, that is their mindset going into funding, right? That is their mindset when they're looking for money, is that, they want the money. And now you're proposing that also let us help you build a culture that will breed success.
Yeah. I do think that companies are often looking for money, and being, a CEO of a startup myself, the fundraising never ends and it's exhausting.
Yeah,
And you're always thinking about, oh my goodness, how am I paying the bills? How am I making payroll? Where we're throwing a Ferrari off the roof of this building like every month of other people's dollars. Like, where is this revenue coming? And what is this piece? And how long? And can we accelerate this? And can we wait to spend this until here? And what? I mean, it is a endless, stressful juggle to be thinking about that capital. Where is that funding coming from? So I get it. I mean, I do get why companies are thinking top of mind, but I just think you're selling yourself short if it's the only thing that you're trying to get.
mm,
And if the person who's providing capital can only be providing capital, then they're probably not a good partner for you. And I will say that there's bad money. And what I mean by that is there's money that comes with people and hooks and strings that you don't want anything to do with. And if you can avoid getting yourself into some of those situations, it's so much nicer to just focus on, really driving the business forward than dealing with um, unruly investors. I'll just say that. I'll just use that language.
for sure.
But you asked about like how to triage that or how to drive that culture change. I would say that you have to first decide what you want your culture to look like. And I think that that's most easily um, defined or explained with a set of values. What are the values that we as a company hold ourselves accountable, and what do we want the customers, stakeholders, partners that we interact with to know about us or to think about us or to experience when they do business with us. And if you can define that in that way first, and then you can say, okay, here are the behaviors or the activities or the actions that say that we're doing those things versus the anti to that, then that's a great first step. But then you actually have to hold everybody accountable to those things. Like you have to use that as, personnel evaluation tools. You have to use that as compensatory activity. So hey, you did amazing at, performing this engineering function, but you were such a pain in the butt to work with. Everybody can't stand you. Like that should make a difference. Um, I think that you have to really hold accountable to what it is that you say you want to be culturally, because as soon as you don't, it's all just crap that you put up on a wall, and who cares what it says? It's a plaque. But if you can really make it a true mindset that is pervasive to the organization, to every last person, which is why I interview every single person before they come in, I think that's when you get the win. That's when you get the culture win.
And how do you deal with failure, or failure is not a good word, mistakes, let's say, because we all know that if you're making mistakes, you're learning. But yet, if you make too many mistakes, it's not good for the company. So, how do you, and when you're building a culture like this, how do you talk about mistakes or things that didn't go well, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two different, um, well, that's not two, there's a bunch of different things, but I'd say maybe it's into two or different three. The first I'll talk with is like technology development. With technology development, I think you need to fail fast and fail often. And what I mean by that is if you are designing and engineering the perfect thing that never has any issue and whatever, it's probably either already exists or you're behind what the technology should be. Like there is no such thing as knowing all the things that you need to know and doing that perfectly. And so if you are, you're fooling yourself, you're hiding something, there will be a gotcha that comes up later, like, but I would rather know right now that something's going to work or it's not going to work, and versus dragging out this process of discovering much later that something's not going to work. So from a tech development perspective, I try to have my teams bring up issues and challenges instantaneously And when you're bringing up an issue or challenge, you also need to be bringing up a solve. What's our way to get around this, or what's the impact? Because we still have only so much capital, and we still have deadlines and partnership arrangements where we need to deliver against different things. But I will say that when it comes to just execution of your job, there's a difference between like a creativity fail versus a job experience knowledge fail. As an engineer, I didn't do this particular, CAE analysis that I knew I was supposed to do. And now we're halfway into production and we're having all of these challenges. Like that's a mistake, not a creativity invention fail. And I think that um, those kinds of things will happen, and you need to build in contingencies to contingency in your time, contingency in your budget to accommodate those things. I'm a big plan B'er. Every plan A needs to come with a plan B, sometimes with a plan C. I'm not quite to SpongeBob's level of plan Z, but I do have a couple of backup plans. Um, but I think that the team needs to understand that they're not going to get roasted for making an error. But I think they also need to know that there's accountability and responsibility for ownership. Oh my gosh, I totally screwed that up. Here's what happened. Here's why I screwed it up. I just missed this. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what I would suggest that we do to fix that. And that like ownership accountability also makes the team much tighter, because then you trust that there's not going to be hiding things or faking things, or this concern that, oh my gosh, we're all going to get fired or zapped or whatever. But that said, you need to learn from those things. And so somebody who's a repeat offender of the exact same mistake or error or fail in the same way, that's something that you have to call out of your team also. And I think a lot of that has to do with really good involved leadership, um, coaching and mentoring and directing of your teams. And so if the first time somebody's hearing about, a mistake or failure or error, and what the corrective actions are for that is after they've done it 3 or 4 or 5 times, then it's not their fault as much as it is the leader's fault, right? And so I think that a culture of accountability and a fear-free culture paired with really good leadership is what helps, I think, manage through, the mistake error kind of battlefield that all businesses have.
You very eloquently described the servant leadership style that you like. How do you get that down into the next layer of the company? Not everyone, it's kind of a me world sometimes, and people are trying to climb and be the corporate, climb the ladder and whatever, and it's hard to be that. So how do you get that servant leadership style down the ladder, so to speak?
Yeah, so I personally, my method is really, I would say, focused around understanding an individual's personal core values. And I talk about service with everybody before I bring them onto the team. And then I talk about service continually with everybody who's on the team. And I use real examples that we're dealing with as a team, and I showcase an awesome, service example. And I also show, and I usually do that in front of everybody. And then I will also identify this was a fail in terms of how we should have served. And I usually do that behind closed doors. The praise in public and admonish in private. I'm a pretty big believer in that. It has to be something extreme if you are going to admonish in public. That said, I also spend a lot of time training my leaders. So I think leadership development is a continued thing that needs to happen forever. And so I talk a lot I got, like I said, I got all this amazing leadership training. And most of, corporate leaders get the school of hard knocks or nothing. They either had a really crappy leader or a really great leader, and they tried to learn what they could from them, and then that's how they do their leadership. They don't get things like, the levels of the stages of team building, and how to recognize which stage you're in and how to help your team get to the next stage of team building. They don't get situational leadership models, by Blanchard, and how do you decide which leadership style you should use given the level of your follower, what development levels you're following. And they don't get like Yohari's window and how to understand what it is that you know about yourself and don't know, and what other people know about you and don't know, and how that can expand you in your personal development. Like they're like, what is all this craziness? And so I try to provide them with some of these real-time examples, and provide them with the same leadership training, in a smaller fashion, in a micro fashion, than what I had. And I also have a pretty clear set of expectations for my leaders. To be a leader for me at FluidLogic, this is what you're required to do. And we review that annually when we do our strategic planning. And then, I am also available as a coach. I'm encountering this situation, what should I do about that? And what does this look like? And that open door policy to my team, I think also helps provide just sort of a little bit more, kind of backup. Like I've got somebody in my court who can help, where you're not feel like you're such isolated on an island. Leadership can feel lonely sometimes. And so I think that that's a couple of ways, at least, that I try to help drive servant leadership down to the lowest level.
Yes, you're speaking my language, that's for sure, and that's a lot of what I do as well. And it's important to think too that leadership, you're always learning, you're always growing. It's a journey. You don't go through a year-long program or a training, and now you're a great leader. I mean, it just continues to evolve and grow over time. So I think organizations that see it that way and put in the time and resources with that in mind do better than just let's get this in so everyone gets up to speed. I mean, it's something we all learn together. As a venture capitalist and investing money and doing that, I'm sure you've seen companies that don't make it. So those companies that don't make it, what do you think the reason is?
Yeah, so I talk about this a lot. And these are the things that we try to avoid at Solyco. And so far we've got 100% viability. We were founded in 2017, so we're 8 years old now. I joined in 2019. Good, listen to me not doing math, pardon me. 2019. So it's been 6 years now. And the companies that we've invested in, are all still companies. And in startup land, that's unusual. You have, they will say that the standard in venture capital is out of every 10 companies, 7 or 8 are going to fail. They're just going to fail. They're not going to be companies anymore. And that time is fast, within the first year or within the first 5 years. And the difference between companies that make it through their first year, and you're like, yes, and then companies that are dead by year five, is like 96%. It is ridiculous the amount of companies that don't make it to just even the 5 year point. Um, anyway, that 7 or 8 are going to fail. Maybe 1 or 2 is going to break even, and 1 out of those 10 is going to win. And winning could be, that they're still in business. Winning could be that they have a 2 to 4, X multiple growth. Winning could be that they killed it and they're a unicorn, but they win. And when you think about that 10, we're not willing to accept that 7 or 8 of our businesses out of 10 are going to fail. We've got 45 companies in the portfolio right now, and we want 45 companies in the portfolio to have a successful exit, period. And that is our goal and target. And when your mindset is that, the work product that you put in to make that happen is a lot different than, well, I'm going to invest in 100 companies, and I'm going to expect that 80 of them are not going to be there anymore. And that's okay. And so I've built that into my risk model, and I've built that into my investment profile, and I've built that into my fund return and all those things. Ours is different. Our mindset's different. But I think the reason why companies do fail are almost always internal factors. So it's not because we had COVID-19 and an international global pandemic. It's not because we had all of the subsequent supply chain challenges that come with that. It It might be because of tariffs, but we're still in the middle of that one. So I don't know. That one's burning me really bad right now. So I've got that one top of mind. But I
Yeah.
will say that the most recorded reason are internal factors, and those are usually greed of the founder or founding team. I want more money. I want to take money. I want to take money out of the company. I feel like I should get more. And then there's battling greed. And then the second thing is pride. I'm amazing at all the things there are in the universe. I know everything. I need to be the smartest guy in the room. And when you don't have a team that can really execute against what needs to get done, they're not going to execute against what needs to get done. And if you can't recognize what your own weaknesses or deficiencies or gaps are and know that you need to, bring in people to help be exceptional in those areas, then you're doomed. You're destined to fail. And so I really think that this internal factor of humility, um, and and then the third thing that I think happens in this internal factor is that this is hard. There is nothing easy about being an entrepreneur. Anybody who says, "Oh, you know what? This corporate job for me sucks. I hate having boss. I hate having all this, whatever. I'm just going to go be an entrepreneur because that crap's easy."
Yeah.
Whoever thinks that watches way too much TikTok because those are lies. Like, what are facts are that being an entrepreneur is a full-time, full body, 100% of your time, not a 40-hour or 45-hour or 50-hour work week, 100% of your time, full body immersion, full family immersion into whatever that business is, period. And that is hard. And, it takes, what is it, typical venture, profile fund is 10 to 15 years, so you're expecting 10 to 15 years of time before a company is going to get to a success factor where it's going to provide returns, whether that's a full acquisition or it becomes cash flowing or whatever. And so that's a long time. And so people just give up because it's hard. And so I would say those are kind of the three things: greed, pride, and perseverance or lack of perseverance,
And what you
are,
just
are the things
described
that really kill a company.
And what you just described there, I think in other words, it's a people problem, it's a culture problem. It's not because the funding wasn't there. It's not because you ran out of money. It's not because you had a bad idea. I think you just described what I've felt too is that, if you have good people and a good culture and you recognize these things going forward, you can usually make it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think there's a lot of money out to be found. I think that it is really challenging to raise money. Um, Having to be a fundraiser myself, I understand how hard that is. And I'm always very thankful for the money that comes to our company. I'm very thankful for our investors making a bet on us. But I think that when companies really fall apart, it's not that I ran out of money and I can't do it. It's I ran out of people who believe in what I'm doing, and that has to do with usually something inside is broken and it's noticeable.
So it sounds like you found your purpose and you're doing great things, but I should ask this maybe earlier, looking at your family history and how you were brought up and so on, why leave the military?
Why leave the military? Oh my goodness. So I first went into the military through an ROTC scholarship. And I pursued an ROTC scholarship, not because I wanted to be in the military, but because I wanted I needed a way to pay for college. And in my household growing up, when you're 18, you're on your own. Figure it out. So I'm like, okay, thanks, Daddy. Thanks, Colonel. Thanks, Mama. No problem.
Yeah.
And so I was an out-of-state student at, a really expensive, granted, it's still a public university, but a really expensive university. And I had to figure out how to make my way. And so that was a way to do that. And I was offered a full ride scholarship for the Army and a full ride scholarship for the Air Force. And my dad, who's an Army colonel, I'm like, Daddy, how do I choose which one of these? And he almost passed me on the head. It's like, oh, Sarah, aim high, which is the motto for the Air Force. And so I best advice I ever got, when your Army Colonel dad tells you to go into the Air Force, that's one where you should probably salute sharply and just do it. And I did just do it. And it was the best advice I'd ever gotten. And after I was in my first year in college, and I have always been very happy to independently make my own decisions and lead and drive. And to have all of that stuff on me and telling me what to do, and you do some things that feel like monkey games and you're like, why are we doing this? This is stupid. To have a whole lot of that, I was not always a very good follower. And I'm like, I don't know that this is for me. And when you have a scholarship, you get 1 year to make up your mind. And the first year is basically free. They'll pay for it no matter what. And after that, they won't. You either sign or you're gone. And my professor of aerospace studies, I hate telling this story. My professor of aerospace studies put out a little rumor that made its way back to me. And I'm sure the intent was that it should make its way back to me. And he says, that Cadet Legler, that was my maiden name, Legler. He says, that Cadet Legler, I don't know that she's going to make it back. I'm not sure she's cut out for this. And when that made its way to me, I said, oh, sorry, I'm not cut out for it. And then I was like, oh, I'll show you.
Yeah.
And I was super motivated to be amazing in all the ways. And I was like, really, I'm not going to fail at something. It's not that I'm not cut out for this, it's that I don't want to do it. But in my mind, I was like, no, 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 I'm going to show you. And I did. And so I kind of came back and I was super cadet. And then I was, distinguished graduate from our field training program. And, I won all of these awards when I was active duty. And I really thrived in this environment of aircraft maintenance. I love it. I still love it. I still love the smell of JP8 jet fuel. How ridiculous is that? I still love hearing, jet engine noise. My husband and I were on a vacation to Scotland this summer, and we saw four ship formations where we were hiking just because they probably were from Mildenhall or Lakenheath, but flying, and we both got all giddy and excited. There's just something about that air power that speaks to me. It was so incredible. And that time of service and the camaraderie with those people, so incredible. So why not military? Well, I did 20 years and I did 6 active duty. And when I left active duty, it was a really hard family decision between my husband and I because we were both in the military together. And when you're a joint spouse, you deploy no matter what, you both deploy no matter what, family, whatever. And I had just had my second son. So I had 2 small boys, and I didn't want my kids raised in daycare. And I was concerned about my husband and I both having pretty high impact roles, and that we were going to be deployed all the time. And how are we going to do that to our kids? And so it was not rainbows and sunshines in my household when we were trying to decide which one of us was going to stay in the military and which one of us was not. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But in the end, I decided that active duty was not going to be a thing for me. And one of the best conversations I had, because I was at a pretty low point giving up the military, because I was going to be a general. I was going to go all the way. Because don't tell me that I'm not amazing and cut out for this, you know,
Yeah.
Colonel Allen. But anyway, and and then I just said no because my family is more important to me than that, and it has to be. And one of the best conversations I had during that time was a mandatory conversation that I wasn't even expecting that I had to have. But when you go through a separation, you have an exit checklist basically. And one of the stops on my checklist was to talk to the reserve recruiter. And I talked to the reserve recruiter for, it was an hour session. And we maybe were like at minute 10. And I'm like, okay, I'm sold. I'm in. I didn't even know this was an option. Like, I can stay in, but I don't have all these other things and I can still serve. And even though it's limited and. So I became a citizen airman, and that gave me this balance between, um, my family, who was number one to me, and my service, which was my passion. And it was really that was also a gift. And it was a really hard decision. But in the end, it has to be. Jesus and then my family and then whatever else my vocation is, right? That has to come first. That was just, it was a tough decision, hard thing to do. Now, do I think that it's amazing today? And would I have had this journey that I've had and be where I'm at today if that wouldn't have happened? No. And so am I a huge believer in this idea of don't think that, this door shuts or that something happens and everything's doomed, like trying to find what that path is, that there is a path for you. I am, and I really try to encourage people to be thinking about that next path, not to be so stuck in the pain of whatever that moment is, because that was a painful moment for me.
With all that vast experience and you've accomplished amazing things, if I were to tell you or ask you, what does success look like? How do you define success? What would you say?
Well, success is that my children love Jesus and go to heaven. But professional success, I feel like I'm there. And I don't mean that to be arrogant, but I mean, what more could I ask for? I have an amazing partnership with really incredibly sharp people, and I'm a believer in steel sharpens steel. I always want to be with people who I think are smarter and better and more amazing than me, and I'm with them. That's awesome that they let me be part of this team. I'm leading a company that is focused around making the world a better place. Our mission is to hydrate humanity. We think that people can be the very best version of themselves, cognitively and physically, if they just consumed water correctly. And so we're trying to help people do that. And it's so impactful, like the results we're already getting. I have this incredible family. I've got 3 kids. My eldest is at University of Michigan. My second's at Indiana University, engineering, data science, and my daughter is a junior in high school who's killing it. I mean, like, what more can I have a great marriage with my husband, and we have had our ups and downs, but it's foundational. And I mean, what more could I ask for?
Yeah.
It's success,
Well,
loving
Sarah,
what you have.
in anticipation of our discussion today, is there anything that I haven't asked you or haven't covered that you want to cover in the program today?
No, I think we've actually taken a really nice journey. So I appreciate so much the conversation and the question path and the time here today. So Steve, thank you.
So at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question, and that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Leadership is about relationship and high quality. All leaders have high quality relationships where you are authentic. You're not trying to model something that's not you. You are using all the best of you in a way that helps the other person be the best of them. It's
Very,
relationship.
very well said. I couldn't agree more. Well, Sarah, this has been a complete pleasure. I can just feel your passion and feel your vibe, and you're doing exciting things, and you enjoy doing that, and you kind of have that dual approach. You've got that STEM side of you, but then you've also got the relationship and human side of you too, which is a great combination. So,
Thank you.
thanks for being on the show today and sharing with us what you think. It's been great, and maybe we'll see each other down the road one of these days.
Yeah, I would love that, Steve. And thank you so much. And I'll just tell everybody to drink more water and check us out at fluidlogic.com.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thanks for
All
being
right.
on the
Thank you.
show, and take care. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.